Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of my miniseries analyzing Avatar: The Way of Water. If you haven't seen part 1 and would like to watch that first, the link to that video will be in the description. But without wasting any more time, let's get right back into it. So the next thing I probably should talk about, considering I just finished taking a look at the plot, is the characters. So does The Way of Water possess a plethora of well-written, fleshed-out characters? Or is it riddled with a bunch of bad ones? Well, the answer I think is definitely somewhere in the middle. There are definitely your fair share of competently written, or at least semi-competently written characters, but for every decent character in the film, there's a character which I strongly dislike. Let's start off with our protagonist of the story, Jake Sully. Now I will come out and say that I think that Jake Sully as a character had a big improvement in this film compared to the last one. In Avatar 2009, Jake Sully just really wasn't that interesting. He didn't really have that many strong, defining character traits, and there wasn't much emotional weight in Sam Worthington's performance. A lot of times he just felt like a bumbling idiot, which didn't really make sense considering his military background. And he honestly just didn't feel worthy to me of being the protagonist of the biggest movie of all time. In The Way of Water, however, the writers improved Jake in almost every way. They actually decided to make his military background one of the key pillars of his character this time around. In the first one, you could sense at times that Jake had a military background, but a lot of times I would look at how he was being portrayed on screen and thought to myself, there is no way that this guy was a Marine. In this film, however, you really got the sense of Jake's prior military experience and his capabilities as a military leader. His own sons even refer to him as Sir. I also like how they gave Jake a lot of responsibility as a person. You really feel the pressure on him to lead his tribe to military victory, to protect the tribe from the human invaders, and the responsibility to protect his family at all costs. It gives his character a lot more emotional weight, and I think that Jake is a stronger character because of it. I also can't tell you how refreshing it is to see a strong, masculine father figure in modern Hollywood. A lot of times in modern movies, instead of writing well-written and strong male and female characters, writers will often write the male protagonists as weak and incompetent idiots in order to elevate the status of the female. But thankfully, that is not the case in The Way of Water. Jake is a commanding presence on screen and is much more worthy of the title of protagonist in this Avatar than the last one. On the other hand, one of our protagonists that actually took a step back in terms of quality from the last film is Neytiri. Neytiri just does not have a lot to do in this film. In Avatar 2009, Neytiri was very important to that story because she was Jake's portal to the new world that he was coming to discover. She has a lot more screen time in that film and a much bigger stake in the plot. Neytiri was honestly probably one of the best characters in that film. In The Way of Water, however, it almost feels as if Neytiri has just been sidelined to serve as Jake's wife, and that's about it. She has very little screen time, and especially in the second act, I literally forgot she was even in the movie. It sucks because when she does get her occasional moments to shine, I think that they are some of the most emotional moments in the whole film. These moments are definitely present throughout the third act. It's worrisome though just how little screen time she got in this film compared to the last one, because it makes me feel that there is the possibility that she's going to get even less and less as the series goes on. For the upcoming films, her character is the one that I am the most worried about. Now let's take a look at the rest of the Sully family. Individually, I think that the kids are for the most part pretty good, but whenever they're all together, their scenes are for the most part just written horribly. I think it has a lot to do with what they're actually saying. I think now is a good time to put it out there that the dialogue in this film is shockingly horrendous. So much of what the children say to each other is so pointless, annoying, and just takes you out of the experience. Nothing took me out of the experience more though than the American slang. I have no clue who greenlit these lines to be the actual lines in the movie. I understand that even though we're hearing it as English, they're actually speaking Na'vi, and maybe that's what it's supposed to translate to, but I don't know who thought it was a good idea for an alien species to say American slang words. Looking at all the kids individually, however, Toot doesn't have much to do, obviously. They're obviously just putting her in the story so that she can be set up for the future movies. She was fine and inoffensive, so I had no problems with her. Although Neteyam is definitely a side character, I think he is definitely a good side character. He definitely has his own unique personality, and the best thing about him is that he's a side character that actually has a stake in the plot and a reason for being in the story. Neteyam is very key in the overarching development of Loak and Jake's character, and the best kind of side characters are the ones that help change our main characters in a meaningful and interesting way. And Neteyam definitely does that, unlike another side character that we'll get to in a moment. Kiri's an interesting one because I don't think that she was that bad, but I didn't think that she was that good. I think that the writers just leaned a little too heavily into the she's super weird but that's what makes her special character trait, and I just never really found it that compelling. They also tried to write heavy connections between her and Grace from the last movie, and from the get-go, I just never really cared for it that much. Also, having a 73-year-old Sigourney Weaver voice a literal teenager was a truly dumb decision. It doesn't matter how much audio synthesizing you do, it's still going to sound super off. Loak, I think, is probably the best out of all the Sully children. He gets the most screen time, especially in the second act, and I think that it's pretty clear that they're setting him up to be the main character of the franchise in the future. Maybe not for Avatar 3, but probably for Avatar 4 and 5. Because he gets so much time dedicated to him, he obviously gets the most character development. Although he's pretty dumb at times due to the fact that he's a teenager and makes stupid decisions, I think that his character was likable and someone that the audience could root for. His character definitely changes throughout the film, and I think that his love affair with Siraya definitely has potential in the later films. So I'm interested to see where his character goes. But before I wrap up talking about the kids, I sadly have to talk about one more, which is Spider. Spider is by far the worst character in the film. He is extremely annoying, and the performance is so bad. No offense to the actor, but it just felt like he was way out of his depth in this film. It honestly felt like they took some random kid from a Disney Channel show and said, now you're going to play a major character in one of the biggest movies of all time. And that turned out about as well as you'd expect. But worst of all, there's almost no reason for him to be in this movie. For 2/3 of the film, he is literally just Quaritch's little Tarzan sidekick. That's it. The only thing that he does is he helps give Quaritch a little bit of depth when he decides to save his life from Neytiri in the third act. That is the only instance in the entire film that I could find where he served any purpose at all. Spider's father's character, however, is a lot better than he is. Quaritch, like Jake, I also think is an improvement upon his previous version in Avatar 2009. One minor thing that they did in The Way of Water with Quaritch that just wasn't present in Avatar 2009 was they actually gave Quaritch a clear character motivation. Sure, it's very simple, he wants to kill Jake Sully at all costs, but at least it's very clear and concise what he wants. Compare that to 2009, I don't know what Quaritch's motivation was. Him coming back in the form of his enemy was also an interesting plot point, and it made his character very intriguing from the get-go. I also think that the performance from Stephen Lang is very strong. I won't go as far to say that Quaritch was a very good antagonist, but I do think that he was pretty solid, and surprisingly one of the better parts of the film, which I certainly did not expect. There was also a number of smaller characters which I'll mention briefly. I thought that Tonwari and Ronal were solid additions. I liked the fact that they counterbalanced each other. Tonwari, the one who's more welcoming and has a ton of respect for Jake, and Ronal, the one who is very untrusting and suspicious of the fact that Jake and his kids are part Sky people genetically. Tonwari and Ronal's children were okay, but I found the sons to be way too much of a stereotypical high school bully type for my liking, and it was just kind of boring and uninteresting. Norm and Max are just completely not a factor in this film at all. It's clear that they had no clue what to do with them. Quaritch's squad members sucked. They aren't even characters, they are just bodies to fill up space. It honestly just feels like they're in a video game where there's the big bad and they're just as goons. The whale hunter guy I couldn't give two fucks about. The whole subplot with him and the anti-human agent Goo was just so pointless. And that just about wraps up the characters. If there was anyone else, I completely forgot that they existed and probably aren't even worth mentioning. So now we're going to transition into the next topic of the video. So probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest thing to analyze about film in general is the themes and the messages that a film is trying to get across. Because it often can be very subjective from person to person what the film is trying to say. Other times though, a film's themes can be very objective and it's very easy to identify what the film is trying to get across. I think that The Way of Water definitely has a little bit of both. There are some very clear, objective themes that The Way of Water is trying to get across. The biggest one, which was also very present in Avatar 2009, is that humanity has lost its touch with the natural beauty of the world, and we should strive to return to some of the older ways of life. A lot of people are not very big fans of this message being portrayed in the film though. However, this isn't actually a bad message at all. Us humans in a lot of ways have lost our touch with the natural world and our past. So why do people dislike it so much? I think that the answer lies in the way that James Cameron goes about portraying this message. It's too black and white and way too surface level to get across the message that he's trying to. Humans, by nature, are a very flawed species, but in the Avatar films, they are too flawed. Besides the occasional good human, every human in this franchise is just evil. They conquer shit, they kill people, they destroy things. There's not really one redeeming quality about the humans. In contrast, the Na'vi are way too unflawed. It's obvious that in James Cameron's mind, that the humans in these films are supposed to represent a future version of ourselves if we keep going down the path that we're going. The Na'vi are supposed to represent a version of ourselves from the past. In particular, it's trying to portray a version of some of our native peoples here on Earth. The problem is they are way too unflawed to be realistic or interesting. For the sake of this argument, let's say that the Na'vi are supposed to represent the Native Americans. Now, I'm not sure if James Cameron necessarily had the Native Americans in mind when he was creating the Na'vi, but it's a native people that often gets associated with the Na'vi. Now, there's a lot of interesting and beautiful things about the Native American culture. But just like all peoples across the earth, there's a lot of fucked up things too. Native American tribes would often go to war with each other and do horrific things to the tribe that ended up losing. Now, I'm not saying that James Cameron necessarily had to do this specifically with the Na'vi, but the fact that the Na'vi had no conflict within themselves and no flaws to speak of makes it very unengaging from a writing perspective. This message that James Cameron is trying to get across, in my opinion, would have been much more interesting if the two factions that he's putting up against each other would have been more in the gray area in morality, because that's a more realistic depiction of how animals are. Another one of the big themes, which I think most people can agree on is one of the stronger parts of the film, is the necessity and the strength of family. The Sully family goes through a lot of hardship throughout this film, but they're able to get through most of the challenges that they have because they all have each other's back. Yes, they do fight on occasion like all families do, but the film makes it a point to emphasize the fact that they are stronger together than they are separate. This is a very simple yet effective message and at times really helped carry the film forward. Before I end this video, I also thought that I'd give one of the more subjective messages that I took away from the film. And that message is that sometimes in order to learn the hardest of lessons, you must learn in the hardest of ways. I think that this message all revolves around the death of Neteyam. In terms of how it relates to Jake, Jake's purpose the entire movie has been to protect his family. Despite him trying his best, his sons are always getting into life-threatening situations. He moves him and his family across Pandora to protect them from his enemies. But even this isn't enough, and eventually his enemies find him, and his son is killed in a battle. As a result of his son dying, I think that Jake learns that he can't just simply run away from his problems. He must confront them head on. He's not all-powerful, and as it relates to protecting his family, all he can do is do the best that he can do, because that's all anybody can do, is try their best, even if they fail in the end. As it relates to Loak, he struggled with accepting maturity the entire film. He is always dragging his siblings into harmful situations, especially his older brother Neteyam. But every time he is bitched out by his father, he just shrugs it off and repeats the same mistake again and again. At the end of the film, when he drags his brother into yet another harmful situation, he pays the ultimate price and has to watch his brother die right in front of him. I think this is where something finally clicked in Loak's head. After this moment, he's able to lead and save his father from death, winning back his respect after his actions got his brother killed. I think from here on out, we're going to see a very much changed and more mature Loak in the future installments. Well, that's going to do it for this part, guys, but there is definitely still more to talk about when it comes to Avatar: The Way of Water. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll be notified when I post part 3. But anyways, that's all I got for today, guys. I'll see you next time.